All right, so before we go over the patch notes of 9.0.5, I wanted to give you guys some context of exactly what we're comparing the Blood Decay to now versus how it's been so far in the expansion. I've been playing Blood Decay for the past couple years, and this is the only class I've played and the only class I've had time to play since the expansion started is Blood Decay. Rating M+, not really any PvP, obviously. I mean, who does Blood Decay in PvP? But I have basically a good grasp on how the Blood Decay is going in M+. I pugged almost everything in M+ up until this point. I just have now gotten a team together because we've gotten so high together in IO. I'm 1965 IO. So for those of you guys who think that Blood Decays can't tank higher keys and that they suck, I'm here to prove you wrong. As well as everybody else that is higher than me. Um, Blood Decays are actually pretty tanky in Shadowlands. They came in with a good toolkit. We got quite a few things that changed in our talent tree, as well as things that were baseline that weren't baseline that made us tankier. I don't think that Blood Decays are as bad as people thought that they are or they were. I know that in BFA they struggled quite a bit because of the mob density in the dungeons. And of course, they still have the same problem with getting one shot by physical attacks for sure. But because the mobs aren't very dense in most of the dungeons here in Shadowlands, and we have had things added to our toolkit going into this expansion, I think Blood Decay's more tankier than people think. So I'm here living proof as a Blood Decay that you can time 20s, 19s, and up. And of course, there's guys like Dorky and now and all the other guys that are higher than me that are timing even higher keys like 23s and 24s on their Blood Decay, which is really, really amazing. So Blood Decay is actually really good so far in this expansion. Are they the best tank right now? No, they're not, because the damage is lacking, and they still have that one shot randomness about them if they get hit by a very, very hard hitting ability. So that's kind of giving you a little bit of context of where they're at right now. They are good. They are very good. Their damage is not very great, but that's how they're doing so far, in my opinion, and from what I've seen. A very good Blood Decay can out tank a mediocre Vengeance Demon Hunter, and any other tank that's really experienced can out tank anything, really. But I wanted to give you guys that context before we actually talked about the patch notes. Okay, so let's talk about the patch notes now. I gave you some context. Let's talk about what actually's changed. And there's really only one thing that actually stands out that has changed and that we should talk about. And that's this right here, Crimson Rune Weapon. I didn't really highlight that very well for you guys, but there it is. Crimson Rune Weapon now causes Dancing Rune Weapon to generate 5 Bone Shield charges. It never did that before. And reduces the cooldown of Dancing Rune Weapon by 5 seconds. It was 3. So you're getting now 5 Bone Shield charges when you cast Dancing Rune Weapon, which is one of your most powerful defensive abilities of Blood Decay. I always tell all my friends that I run with, if I have Dancing Rune Weapon up, I'm not dead. I'm never going to die with that up. So Dancing Rune Weapon is one of your biggest cooldowns, gives you 5 Bone Shield charges, and it every time you lose a Bone Shield charge, you get your Dancing Rune Weapon cooldown off cooldown by 5 seconds versus every 3 that it was. Now, although this is a very minor change, this is actually very, very, very a pivotal change. Right now, the go-to legendary was Super Strain. It always was Super Strain. Any argument against Super Strain were people that just didn't know what they were talking about. Super Strain was the strongest one because it gave you runic power, it gave you extra damage and threat. But now with this change to Crimson Rune Weapon, this is actually going to be our preferred legendary. Now, I'm going to go into why it's not always going to be your preferred legendary in a little bit. Let's talk about why it's actually going to be better. So if you know Blood Decay, or if you don't know Blood Decay, I'll explain. When you go into a pack, normally, let's talk about the opener on any dungeon. And let's say you're not hitting a turnip or anything and generating runic power. So let's go into the first mob pack of the other side. We'll talk about that one, because that's a pretty big pool, right? What you'll do is you'll most likely get into the pack. You'll summon your ghoul. You'll pop Dancing Rune Weapon. You'll Blood Boil. Then you'll have to Marrow Rend to get your Bone Shield up, and then you'll have to Blood Boil, and then you'll have to then Heart Strike, and then Heart Strike and Blood Boil, and then your rotation starts. So with all that going on, that's a global after a global after a global that needs to constantly happen. And by having this legendary now, giving you 5 Bone Shield charges off the bat, you don't have to use those 2 runes to cast a Marrow Rend. And saving that global lets you pop Dancing Rune Weapon and go right into a Blood Boil and then a Heart Strike. You can skip the whole Marrow Rend. You don't have to waste those 2 runes anymore to get that defensive up. And by doing so, it adds so much more upfront ease getting into the rotation of your class and generating threat right off the bat. Dancing Rune Weapon also mirrors your attacks too, so it's going to mirror your Heart Strikes, it's going to mirror your melee attacks and stuff like that. It's also going to double up your Blood Plague on all the enemies. So it's going to make it easier for you to gain threat. It's going to make it easier for you to start Heart Striking and start pulling runic power for your Death Strikes, rather than having to worry about building up your defensives going into the pack, which is kind of ridiculous. So that's the biggest thing that has changed, and this is very, very pivotal for you as a Blood Decay. Now, let's talk about when you wouldn't use Crimson Rune Weapon. You wouldn't want to use Crimson Rune Weapon on a fixed weeks where you have to kite or you can't pull big. We're in a week where we can't pull big. It's bolstering week. You can't pull a lot of mobs together, and if you do pull a lot of mobs together and things start to bolster, you have to kite. The beauty of this legendary is being in combat, because you only get your Dancing Rune Weapon off cooldown faster if you're actually in tanking and losing Bone Shield charges so that your Dancing Rune Weapon can come back up. If you're having to kite because of bolstered mob, or if you're not facing a lot of mobs that are attacking you and having you lose Bone Shield, then it's not really worth it. You're not going to get the most benefit from it. Another week that you don't want to use this on is going to be Necrotic Week. Same problem, probably the worst. I'm going to swear by this. Necrotic Week is the worst week as a Blood Decay. There's so much bad about it. Maybe I'll make another video about it, or you guys can talk to me about it in Twitch, my Twitch stream. But Necrotic is another one where you don't want to run Crimson Rune Weapon. You're going to be constantly kiting things, so you're not going to get the value out of the Crimson Rune Weapon. The only other scenario that you won't want to use Crimson Rune Weapon Legendary is going to be in the raid, and that's a no-brainer. You're not going to be tanking the whole time. You're not going to be taking a lot of melee attacks, so you're not going to be losing a lot of Bone Shield charges, which means that your Dancing Rune Weapon is going to be sitting on cooldown for a long time. Any other week, I'm thinking off the top of my head, any other week, I'm pretty sure you're going to want to go with this. Any fortified week where it's not bolstering Necrotic, this is going to be your go-to, because most likely than not, you'll be able to tank a lot, you'll be able to lose a lot of Bone Shield charges, and your Dancing Rune Weapon will be up for quite a long time. So that's the biggest change. I wanted to talk about that, the benefits of it, the fundamentals that it's going to change in your actual opener and your rotation, how useful this is going to be, and then when you're not going to want to use it. Because I want people to understand that not everything is so black and white. There's always a middle ground. There's always a pro and a con to things. And I don't know if many people out there are going to think about that. Most people are using Crimson Rune Weapon on a week like this, tyrannical bolstering, and that's not smart. You're not going to, maybe they're playing around with it. That's fine. Go ahead. But the people that are using Crimson Rune Weapon on weeks where they can't actually benefit the most out of it should be going Super Strain. That's going to be still your go-to on your raid bosses, and it's going to be your go-to on bolstering weeks if you want to do keys that week, and it's going to be your go-to on Necrotic weeks. So that's really all that's changed for the Blood Decay directly. The one last thing I wanted to talk about in this video is how the Blood Decay is, the state of the Blood Decay as of right now. Now, if you just look at this, what happened to Blood Decay, you would look as if it's a buff and that they've gotten better. And yes, you are correct. But you also have to look at what else happened here. Most Blood Decays, this is kind of going to be very general. Most Blood Decays were Venthyr. And if you were a smart Blood Decay, you were Venthyr. There's nothing wrong about going Necrolord. There's nothing wrong about going Kyrian if you're a Raider or Mythic Pusher. But most people that were that are very top in the world as blood decays were going Venthyr. If you were going Venthyr, the only benefit you had really over another pug tank as a blood decay, if you were equally matched, if you were going to be taking over a Vengeance Demon Hunter, is if you were going into Halls of Atonement or Sanguine Depths and you were Venthyr. Now, the Halls of Atonement and Sanguine Depths kind of got nerfed. Well, the Sanguine Depths didn't get nerfed. I mean, it got a little bit better. The Anima Cages kind of persisted a little bit longer, which is nice. The Halls of Atonement, however, kind of sucks because now they nerfed the damage of the Stoneborn by 50%. He does last a little bit longer. He still keeps that 10% damage reduction to your team. But and he's up for longer by 15 seconds, but it's not going to be as desirable. That's just a small change. That's not going to be like the end all be all to blood decays and being Venthyr, but it kind of sucks to see that Halls of Atonement got that nerf. But it was, let's be real here, that damage was crazy from that little Stoneburn. The other thing, if we're looking at this from if we're looking at all tanks and how the blood decays are standing right now, Vengeance Demon Hunter is still very good. Brewmasters are very good. Bear Druids are very, very good. But if we look at the fact that the Prot Warrior got a buff by 10% of all their abilities, their damage abilities got increased, and the damage of Thundercrap got an additional 10%. Prot Warriors are all the hype right now. And there's a lot of talk about a lot of the top Vengeance Demon Hunters like Nerf Tank moving, or Nerf Meta, moving back to his Nerf Tank Warrior. So with them on the rise, the Warriors on the rise with all this damage increase to them, and then they also got what looks like going to be a very, very cool Necro Lord ability. This is only going to be good for pre-mades if you're running with a group, because you can actually maximize the banner from the Covenant ability. But besides all that, I don't want to go on a rant. If we're looking at the Protection Warrior getting a buff, we were only beating out Protection Warriors in damage as a blood decay. Now that they got buffed, they're doing more damage than us. We're at the bottom of the barrel in terms of damage. So when we look at the legendary change that we got and a new preferred legendary for most weeks, blood decays got a buff. But blood decays in terms of ranking of all tanks actually went down a slot. And we're the least damaging tank now in the entire game. It doesn't feel good, because now if you're in the same queue, if you have the same IO as a Vengeance Demon Hunter, a Bear Druid, a Brewmaster, and a Prot Warrior all in queue, the chances are you're not going to be taken unless they need a Venthyr and they're doing a Venthyr dungeon. Or unless your IO is very, very high. But if you're all equally matched with item level and IO, chances are you're probably not going to get taken. So it's not very good. Comment down below, guys, if what kinds of fixes do you want to see happen to the blood decay? What do you think the biggest struggle is with them? My opinion is that they need to have their damage buffed. Blood Boil needs to be buffed in some sort of way. Maybe our Death Strike should cleave in our Death and Decay. Don't increase the healing to Death Strike, but maybe have our Death Strikes cleave. If we have Death and Decay down, maybe that would help build us some threat. Maybe that'll help build up some more damage. Those are the two things that come off the top of my head. Maybe you guys have some opinions or some ideas on how to fix the blood decay. Overall, it looks like overall, if you compare it to all tanks, they got a nerf because they didn't get any changes and when they needed changes. But I don't want to go on a rant too much. I want to end the video there. Like I said, if you have any things that you want to see with the blood decay, or if you have any comments you want to talk about and discuss down below, I'm going to reply to everybody's comment. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe, come watch me on Twitch, and I'll catch you guys in that next video. Take care.